Good evening. Call this meeting to order. The Milford School Board is meeting on May 20th at 6 p.m. at Benjamin Banneker Elementary School. All public comment will be held in person only, and there is this will be streamed on live for viewing online. Dr. Amory, can I get a roll call?
Good evening. Dr. Adam Brownstein.
Here.
Mr. Matt Booker.
Here.
Mrs. Ashley Connell. Mr. Victor Butch Elsie. Mr. Scott Fitzgerald.
Here.
Mrs. Jennifer Masadi. Mrs. Jean Wiley. Thank you.
Let the record show that we do have a quorum. We stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I trust that everyone has had a chance to look over the minutes for the meeting on April 15th and April 25th. And if so, are there any questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept those minutes.
I move that the minutes be accepted.
We have a motion.
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? The motion carries. Next, I would entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session.
So moved.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. We are in executive session and should be back around 7 o'clock. Thank you. Okay. We have returned from executive, and I would now entertain a motion to return to open session. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. We are in open session. You say there are no changes to the agenda. No one signed up for public comment. So we will jump right to superintendent's report. Dr. Amory.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and we apologize for the delay coming out of executive. We have just a handful of updates this evening. We would like to thank the Miss Pillion Art League, Catherine Walls, and all of our art teachers across the school district, Karen Fitzpatrick at Ross Elementary, Vicki Hudson at Banneker Elementary, Kay Gerton at Miss Pillion Elementary, Christy Stevenson at Morris Early Childhood Center, Christopher Deming at MCA, Julie Scarrett and Corrine Richard at Milford High School for including all of the student work and the Miss Pillion Art League and the annual student art show. It's the 20th year that this event has happened, and it was an incredible showcase of our student art. We just want to thank them for their efforts. This evening, our Behavior Health Professional of the Year is having a state recognition event in Dover. Miss Shannon Granau from Miss Pillion Elementary is representing our school district. And this evening, we'd also like to thank Banneker Elementary School for hosting us. And Banneker, do you have anything you'd like to add this evening? Okay, thank you so much for hosting us. We appreciate being here. And that is my report.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Amory. Next up is academic excellence by Dr.
Oh,
Hagan.
wait, we do have a presentation.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Welcome.
There it is.
Here's the clicker.
You get to click.
All right.
I'm going to start us off. Hi, everybody. I'm Laurie Mormon. I am the assistant principal here at Banneker.
Chad Lazier, principal. We'd just like to welcome you all to Banneker tonight. We have a short little presentation for you. I guess I'd have to turn this clicker on. There we go. Just to start off, you'll notice a theme of construction as we go through our quick slide here, but we'd like to just share with you a brief summary on the focus areas that we had this past school year in order to establish a firm foundation. We worked quite a bit on relationship building. That was because as a new administrator, learning the new teachers and students, that was important, but we've also put that emphasis on our staff and developing those relationships with the kids. In past presentations, we talked about our culture of coaching and our partnership with UD. We've continued that during our PD days. We had select staff members that were designated to also present to our teachers. So we hope to continue that culture of coaching and include some math coaching in the future. We really focused on curriculum integrity, data-based, data-driven instruction, and through our work to create a master schedule for next year, we really focused on establishing some PLC time and making sure that that was a major piece of that so that we could get a lot of the PD that we so sorely needed this year. We focused a lot in that same conversation on special education and MLL integration. A lot of good conversation on the different settings and how we might service those students. Large focus on the attendance of our students and staff. And I'm very proud to say our counselors and ancillary staff members really stepped up to that challenge. And I think later on in the year when we look at some of that student data, our attendance numbers are fantastic. So, and finally, just empowering staff members just in terms of identifying them on different leadership teams, enabling them to have a voice and to really step up during some of those PDs.
Just some of the fun things we did, but making sure that we're supporting the whole child. So not just the academics, but the academics, the social emotional learning, and then ensuring that we integrate all of the different cultures that we have here at Banneker and celebrating those cultures here, which you can see in a few of those pictures there.
Our focus is on academic excellence. You get to see a few pictures of our students really working hard. We know that Smarter Balance is the end-all be-all in terms of the data that we look at the end of the year, but we also look at a lot of other data in terms of like DIBELS assessments and other assessments throughout the year. And although maybe we didn't see or don't currently see the huge increase in that Smarter Balance data just yet, we are seeing trends in those other assessments, specifically the DIBELS assessments, and that our students are growing at a wonderful rate. In the past, the data had a large number of our students in those phonological foundational skills, and then this year, when we're looking at a lot of our data, our student population, the majority are at those higher levels where they're beginning to read and start to do comprehension and fluency. So we're very excited about what that potentially will turn into in terms of data for the Smarter Balance in the following year. We also thought it was important to empower and invest in our people. You'll see some pictures there where we were focusing on the mental health of our staff, and they really had a good time with a painting activity which kind of lended itself to the strategic plan of the district. What I noticed when putting the slideshow together is that no one really snaps pictures when our teachers are sitting in bookworms PDs or anything of that nature. So maybe we'll do that in the future so that we can have some of those opportunities to share. But I'm really proud of our staff. I can't say or share how just important the relationship building and empowering them led into our success for this year. I think that establishing those relationships early was challenging, just being a new face, but we've all come together, and I think we're really primed for some success in the future. And then finally, just building our future. Under construction, you see we have no pictures really to offer there because we are in the midst of that, and I'm sure you're familiar with many of the projects, but Dr. Hale has presented in the past. We, this summer, are getting ready to have windows throughout the building taken care of, some of the pipes wrapped, and just continuing to improve this facility for our students and for our community. And so really excited about those possibilities. I know that the summer is going to be a little bit of a challenge with that, but we're up for it and excited for it. So thank you for your time, and that's the end of our presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions, comments? No? Thank you very much. Next up, Dr. Hageman.
Good evening, and I'm going to invite up several of our very important colleagues. just one. Ileani Abad, who is our dual language immersion specialist. She actually is split between Milford School District and the Cesar Rodney School District. She's an employee on loan from the Department of Ed who is full-time in the school district. So she formerly was a teacher in the Milford School District and then transitioned into a coaching role at the Department of Ed. And we'd like to share with you a little bit about the Milford School District Dual Language Immersion Program because this is a program that is growing. We currently have students in kindergarten through 7th grade, and we'd like to share with you a little bit about this program.
Thank you for the presentation. Thank you for having.
Just for one quick second, we do apologize, but we have like breaking news. Go ahead. Who wants to read it?
Just won JHP of the year.
Milford School. That's great.
Very good.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Wow. Okay. All right. Back to immersion.
That is part of our culture. Yes, thank you for sharing that news. That's coming. Like they say in Spain, a buena hora. Good.
Okay, sorry for derailing you, but they were all chattering.
That
And that's
is,
why the text messages are all coming through.
that is amazing.
Wow, that's super exciting.
Wow. That's how we support our students here in Milford. Support them so much that we win.
So I'm
We digress.
There's no way we can beat that.
no. Now my presentation is not going to be anything compared to that, but that's okay. I'm going to try my best. So as Dr. Carvajal Hickman presented, I am the dual language immersion specialist for the district, and I'm here just to share a little bit about the program and what we are doing as a district. Hopefully this is good. Okay. As I embark in this presentation, please have in mind that my goal is to answer the question on the screen, what it is dual language immersion. Dual language immersion is an educational program where students are taught literacy and content in 2 languages. Milford School District houses Spanish as a partner language for English, meaning students learn Spanish and English at the same time. Milford follows two-way immersion program model where classes are composed of both native and non-native speakers on the partner language. The model promotes proficiency in English and Spanish for both groups. The foundation of dual language immersion rests on 3 pillars. I got it. Gracias. Bilingualism, biliteracy, academic achievement, and sociocultural competence. These 3 pillars are also our goal.
Bilingualism by livers.
I'm going to start with bilingualism and biliteracy. At MSD, the first pillar represents bilingualism and biliteracy. That MSD follows a 50-50 instructional model that integrates language instruction with content learning. A student becomes proficient in both English and Spanish. Both languages are used to teach core academic subjects like math, science, and social studies. That's along as well as in English language arts and then in Spanish language art. The same time that they spend on the English classes is the same time that they spend on the Spanish classes. Half of the day. We use a roller coaster schedule.
Can I add something about this? Because this is one of the most important components of the dual language immersion program, because rather than a English immersion experience for our multilingual learners, we actually have an additive bilingualism program so that students who speak Spanish at home are adding English as an additional language, and they're not subtracting their Spanish. So it's a very asset-based approach so that instead of taking their Spanish, which they learned at home, and replacing it with English, and so that they're never bilingual and biliterate. Sometimes you'll find students who are bilingual, but they don't have literacy in their home language, but we're developing fully bilingual and biliterate, meaning that they can read, write, speak, and do all of those things academically in both languages. What you often find among Spanish-speaking populations, even students who are born in the United States, is that they go to school and their reading and writing is only in English, and so they never achieve academic language in their home language. Therefore, they're always a step behind. And that's one of the equalizers that we can find with the Spanish Dual Language Immersion Program that is often not spoken about.
Gracias. And I just want to piggyback on that. This approach, the dual language immersion approach, fosters both language development while ensuring that students have access to grade level content. So meaning the monolingual students and the dual language immersion students learn the same content. There's no difference in the classroom instruction. The second pillar is academic achievement with short and long-term benefits. Students in dual language programs, in the dual language program, often outperform their peers on a standardized test and achieve higher academic outcomes. This attributes to the rigorous cognitive demands that learning two languages pertain. MSD two-way immersion program fosters a deeper understanding of language and culture among our students, contributing to their academic success. And that's where it comes, just having that whole child approach into the learning when they come from another country, and just using that as a leverage to their, instead of a deficit, seeing as an asset to their academic achievement. MSD, DLI emphasizes on cultural understanding and appreciation, fostering cross-cultural competence among students. By integrating multicultural education, these aspects encourage students to learn about the respect of the culture associated with each language, both English and Spanish, promoting empathy and mutual respect. Through this holistic approach, MSD is not only enhancing language skills, but also cultivating an environment of multicultural appreciation that is growing in our community and social awareness. You probably will be asking yourself, how does DLI connect to Milford and is the Milford strategic planning? We will be answering that question in the following slides. Next. So MSD DLI aligns closely with the district strategic plans due to the direct correlation to MSD, a student iconic portrait of a buccaneer. As you see in the board, in the screen, that encompasses problem solving, communication skills, team building, empathy, and work ethics. DLI students are equipped to find solutions to simple and complex challenges through cognitive benefits from switching between two languages, English and Spanish. Furthermore, DLI fosters collaborative skills, enabling students to effectively communicate and listen in both languages. The Spanish-speaking culture that teaches students to consider different perspectives and work collaboratively to improve the community, ultimately leading to academic achievement and deeper appreciation for multiculturalism. Nice. Gracias. DLI is critical to our MSD, and I can speak that as a parent, I can speak that as a staff, and also I can speak that as part of the community. The program benefits them beyond just the students in the program because it has transcended to the increase in the district capacity to communicate with the families in their native language. DLI has brought an increase to a diverse school staff, such as teachers who look and speak like MSD students, impacting the diversity of school hiring practices, bringing linguistic diversity to recognize an asset instead of deficit. And yes, there has been challenges with the transition from elementary to secondary. However, the district is learning from those hiccups and working diligently to address them. For example, we are looking into the year 2024 2025 to fully staffed on both elementary and secondary campuses. As you see on the screen, as mentioned earlier, the 50-50 model, instructional time is evenly split into two languages, Spanish and English. Milford School District follows the 50-50 model to provide students with a well-rounded education that emphasizes bilingualism, academic achievement, and the social-cultural competence. At this time, we have in our elementary campuses, including Morris, 453 students that are part of the community from Milford School District. Those students are from K to 5th grade, Morris, Banneker, Ross, and they are growing as we speak.
We have a big wait list.
Because we do have a big waiting list, and we do have incomers that speak the language that can benefit from the program as well, as Dr. Cabral said earlier. The highest grade in the MSD right now is 7th grade. We are going to transition next year into the 8th grade. At this time, there are only 89 students between 6th and 7th grade. Next year, students will take 2 courses, one in Spanish for language culture and the other one in Spanish just for social studies. It will encompasses all the social studies at the same level as the monolingual students in the target language. Looking ahead to the future, DLI at Milford High School, the district is excited to share the plans with you today. Cohort number 1, which is in 7th grade right now, will enter 9th grade in the year 2025 and 26. Students will have multiple entry points, having different proficiency levels into the advanced placement and college level Spanish courses. Proficiency data will be used to determine student readiness levels and appropriate placement. MSD goal is for those highly motivated students to graduate with a minor or an associate degree in Spanish. Having that said, being part of the community, we are growing in diversity, and having that in mind, MSD efforts is to continue to enhance the dual language immersion program at their hiring practices. The district is committed to hire educators from diverse backgrounds and nationalities. Milford School District also currently has educators from Nicaragua right now in the classroom, Mexico, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and Peru. The district is excited to highlight the next school year that there will be 3 teachers coming from Spain that is going to join our DLI educators group. This addition will bring even more diversity to Milford School District staff and offer a unique cultural experience for those that are going to have them, for those students.
You didn't say about our students. We have maybe 1, if not 2, dual language immersion teachers who graduated from Milford High School, and they are from the United States, obviously of, Mexican or some other heritage, but they are Americans first.
Yes.
They were my students, actually.
So it does work. So the DLI program has significantly enhanced Milford School District ability to foster diversity among our staff. Moreover, Milford School District embraces linguistic diversity as valuable asset to cultivate. I am here as a proof. Milford School District Dual Language Immersion has expanded diversity among staff across all DLI schools, but also provided crucial support to both English and Spanish-speaking communities in Milford. The district has strengthened the connection and enriched educational environment at all levels in the district and within the community. At this time, we are working with the Milford Public Library in a partnership that's probably going to be during the summer, but we are trying to expand it throughout the year to serve the students in our community. By effectively communicating with the families in their native language, the district has strengthened the connection and enriched the education environment at all levels in the district. The additional support provided for both English and Spanish-speaking population, especially through academic instruction delivered in Spanish, for those that doesn't have the language, has been instrumental. We do have students that are multilingual that can speak 3 and 4 languages. At this time, we have Haitian Creole, and also Mom, which is a dialect from Guatemala. Dual language. Okay. So, Dual Language Spanish Immersion Program is a large representation in Milford School District and the Milford community. Without further ado, the following are parents and student testimonials about our program.
So I got her into the immersion program because I just felt like at that age she was a sponge and it was a great time for her to learn multiple languages. So she enjoys it. She speaks to her friends in Spanish, and it's just something in her future that we look forward to seeing her grow with.
Yes, we love the immersion program. It has given us so many benefits and it has caused my child to be able to think in other ways that I've noticed that my other children haven't been able to. So I thoroughly recommend it to anyone that desires to have their child take the program.
Es bilingüe y sabe dos lenguas.
¿Cuáles?
¿Ah?
¿Cuáles? Dile cuáles lenguas sabes.
Español y inglés.
¿Y entiendes?
Sí.
Y dile lo que entiendes.
Que entiende las matemáticas que hacer en la clase de español. Porque estás haciendo algoritmo convencional. Y estás aprendiendo con señora Matamoros.
¿Te gusta?
Sí.
Yo sé que eres buena.
You tell me you like it.
Ya me gusta el programa.
That's the best.
But he is a non-native speaker. So that's him in action. And we were just asking him questions. I'm going to end with a heartfelt thank you to all of you for helping Milford School District and us, parents, students, and community members to chart the course to excellence and success. So, gracias.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Any comments or questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Gracias.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to invite my colleagues, Dr. Weller and Dr. Hallman, to please come forward and speak about school climate and safety. And they will present about the whole child. Yes, thank you.
I was going to show you right here.
Spanish, that's why.
Hello. So that presentation was near and dear to my heart because Ileani and I worked together years ago when I was a coordinator at Morris, and she worked for the Head Start program. So we were friends well before she even started her career with Milford School District. And I was lucky enough to be the principal 8 years ago when we brought on the program to the district. So very happy to see the success. So we have a presentation. Do you have that? No? Okay, well, I can wing it, but you won't have pictures. We have charts and graphs and... Oh, okay, you have a handout. Follow along, if you will. All right, perfect. Today we are presenting on supporting the whole student, and Dr. Weller and I are kind of sharing this responsibility because there's a lot of parts of our jobs that are overlapping in terms of making sure that we are doing everything we can to provide safe and supportive learning environments. We are looking at Goal 4 of our strategic plan, maintain safe, supportive, and orderly learning environments throughout each school. So as our quarterly update, some of the things that we've been doing is working to establish a social and emotional, mental health, and behavioral intervention curriculum for our schools. We will be using the Conscious Discipline Framework. We have looked at providing dedicated social and emotional lessons weekly for all students in all grade levels. And we have recently purchased Navigate 360 intervention modules, which are going to be a really nice way to actually teach as a part of our discipline process. So if a student has an infraction or a problem, we will be able to work with them to be able to teach them a correct skill that they can employ instead. We also, for our multi-tiered system of support needs inventory, Dr. Weller went around and worked with all of the buildings to kind of assess and amass what they were using in each building for their tiered interventions. And that's an important part of what we do because those interventions, first of all, they're important to have strong Tier 1 interventions to keep students learning as best they can and as emotionally supported as we can. But also in terms of special education supports, we really want to make sure that we're providing as much baseline support as we can before we start moving into those Tier 2 and Tier 3 supports. And really having a strong system in place. Our elementary schools do a really nice job of that. We're working really hard with the secondary schools to implement some of those strategies and also kind of have a consistent district-wide process. So we will have some guidelines for implementation and interventions that we will be sharing with the buildings for next school year. Universal screenings that will be consistent across the district so that we can have tiered interventions and a systematic approach. And we are currently collaborating with the Department of Education and the University of Delaware through their MTSS Technical Assistance Center as part of that process. And I think we need to. Sorry about looking at the presentation. It's kind of nice to have it in front of you.
I think, are you able to get that up, Eric? Good evening, everyone. So at our April board meeting, Dr. Brownstein discussed getting the student's voice more so than what I was able to do with the focus group. And we did a poll of our secondary campus, so our MCA and our high school students. We chose 5 classes in each school. I ended up having it sent out. We made sure we covered every grade, and then at the high school, we sent it out. I had the counselors send it out through Schoology to all the students because we didn't have as many responses at the high school level as we did the MCA level. So I wanted to make sure we got as many responses as possible. So this is just a breakdown of some of the data that came out of that survey, wanting to understand what our students know about our code of conduct and how they feel about the code of conduct currently. One of our questions was, do you know where to find a copy? And we had at the high school, a higher percentage did not. So that just shows the need for us working on the training that I discussed doing moving into next school year. If they answered yes, we wanted to know if they felt like it was being applied consistently. And as you can see, we need to do some work there. With the, sorry, give me 1 second. Yeah, I think this one's up twice. In terms of what directly affects our students the most, now mind you, we only had 97 responses from our high school, but as you can see, there were some voices regarding our hallways, the bathrooms being locked, which we have a plan moving into next year for that, so we should not have that issue. We are working with our high school team diligently to make sure we can have our bathrooms open next year, but also observed and watched by staff. Vaping and smoking was an issue for them, and then also the dress code. And some of those miscellaneous things were areas like parking permits and some issues in classrooms and things like that, but I didn't want to break every single one of them down. Asking our students where they feel supported in their schools. As you can see, a majority of them feel supported in the classrooms and through their teachers, everywhere, counselors, sports, and academics. We asked the students if they could change one thing about the code of conduct, what would it be at our high school level? Most of them said they did not know or it was not applicable, and then the next highest was the dress code. We polled them on what parts of our current dress code violations make them feel uncomfortable in any of the environments in the building. So we broke it down between bathrooms, hallways, classrooms, the cafeteria, and the bus. Interestingly enough, most of our students said they were never uncomfortable in our building in the different areas. However, you can see that some of them did have a level of being uncomfortable in the building, but a majority of them, when answering, said never, which I think is beneficial for us to, as Dr. Brownstein talked about last month, hearing their voice, because sometimes we assume we know what they want and what they are saying, and when we actually talk to them, it might not bother them, or it might not be bothering them as much as we think it is. Moving into MCA, again, it was 50-50 with our students at MCA of where to get a copy of the Code of Conduct. However, again, some of them more so than not do not feel like it's being applied consistently, so we're going to work on that next year. When we asked where they felt supported at MCA, again, a majority of them feel supported the most in their classrooms with their teachers. Everywhere, counselors and academics scored relatively high. We have some work to do with the none, NA, or IDK and the nowhere at MCA, but we have a very good plan moving into next year for that. When asked what directly affects our students at MCA from the Code of Conduct, the dress code overwhelmingly was the thing that directly affected them. 236 responses at MCA. If you could change, when asked if they could change one thing about the Code of Conduct, again, overwhelmingly, the dress code is the one thing that our students would change, with 171 students out of 236. And then the next highest was not applicable, or IDK. Sorry, IDK means I don't know. I apologize, but that's what the kids actually wrote. So when we asked them if anything, the environments where the Code of Conduct violations make them feel uncomfortable, again, overwhelmingly, our students said no, like never. They don't feel uncomfortable in those areas. However, we do have percentages of some level of uncomfortability by our students at the different areas. I would like to give Mr. Lobiondo kudos for the buses, because our buses are overwhelmingly the least amount of issues from this poll with our students. So that was very good data to be able to see. So that's the student voice of our MCA and our high school students. Again, we did not send it out to everyone. We wanted to make sure we had a classroom every grade at each level. And Mrs. Galati helped me send it out through MCA. So we made sure we covered classrooms with various students. And any questions on that data? Okay. We're going to move into the policies that Dr. Hallman and I have for you all this month, starting with the dress code.
So we talked about data decision making. So we are definitely going to be looking at some of the information that brought us to looking at the dress code this evening. We review it as part of our annual review process each year. We had definitely been hearing concerns regarding the consistency of the application of the dress code, as well as the use of discipline around our dress code in the various buildings within our district. And we had been hearing, as had the board, even I think from early on in the school year, feedback about people who are struggling with the dress code and parents who are upset, students, staff, and administrators who were having a hard time with having to enforce the dress code at the start of the year and as the year went on. So lots of information kind of came at us regarding that early in the year. So one of the things I did for this particular presentation was to really just look at some of the referral data, which did not surprise me, but it really is kind of, I think that this is in an effort to do the best we could to enforce. And I'm just going to say that that's what I believe there. But if you look at the MCA data, obviously the most referrals written in the school were for dress code violations. Almost double. The skipping is obviously a major concern at the high school, but pretty close second, you will find tardiness and dress code violations there over 563. And this is not obviously the whole year. It's just up until a week or so ago. So when we looked at the dress code policy, we really wanted to take into consideration feedback from all of the stakeholders, really looking to reduce restrictions on the clothing choices that students have. This process began, I believe, on September 18th, if I'm not mistaken, when we had a board meeting where we had several parents and students present that they were unhappy with the dress code and they had some concerns around the dress code and were looking for some changes. And that began this entire process. So really what we heard overwhelmingly was the restriction on the choice of clothing was really the big issue that people had. So there was a lot of discussion around families and students with limited resources. And one thing that we believe, and Dr. Weller and I have talked about, is that we do think that this could potentially improve school climate in that administrators are not having that immediate confrontation with students upon entry into school around what it is they are or are not wearing. And teachers, as students are entering the door, having been a former middle school teacher, I know that's the opportune time to catch a dress code violation is as the student is coming in. Really don't want that very first interaction with a student coming into your classroom to be a negative one. It's been very difficult, I think, at the secondary level for that consistency because you have multiple teachers. And some teachers are trying really hard and some teachers are not, and the students are feeling conflicted about what they are and are not allowed to do. What we feel like this does is it prioritizes more serious discipline offenses, or it could potentially prioritize them. And I think that would reduce the loss of instructional time because if you add up the referrals that are received, these students are receiving in-school suspension and potentially out-of-school suspension, depending on the number of offenses. So that's just something to consider if that violation warrants loss of instructional time. So we will talk about, we will present the new dress code as a first read for you this evening. But we have some other policies that we'll be looking at as well.
So moving on to some additional policies that we have for you regarding maintaining the safety of all of our students in the building and the whole child approach. If we move into the next page of the presentation, you will have a second read of the Code of Conduct. However, the one that I really want to go over with you is the threat assessment policy, which is up for first read, and that is a new policy to the Milford School District. We will actually be the first district in the state with this policy. This is a program that is a violence prevention strategy that is nationally evidence-based across the country, and it is right now being offered through the state of Delaware's DEMA Comprehensive School Safety Plan program as a safety and wellness suite. There's 3 components to that suite. One is the Stop It/Safe DE application, which is an anonymous reporting application, which we are already using at our secondary campuses. The second component is the behavioral threat assessment process known as the Comprehensive School Threat Assessment Guide through Dr. Dewey Cornell. He originally created this in Virginia. It was known as the Virginia model, and now that it has gained national evidence-based data, they call it the CSTAG model. The third component is the suicide risk assessment piece, which I do have our suicide prevention policy up for an updated read. But to focus on the threat assessment piece, I did gather this information from DEMA. Currently, we have 194 schools in Delaware using this program, and it transfers from district to district. The way that this works, if a student makes a threat of violence or a threat to the school's safety, they would be put through an interview process very similar to if they made a threat to their own physical safety or a suicidal threat. It's a very quick 5 to 7 question process. Then depending on how they answer those questions, it can be increased or moved on as transient. The purpose of this and the benefits of it is if a student does make a statement towards another student in jest or anger, or maybe there really is something that is brewing, we are catching it before it becomes a physical situation because we are able to work through the process in this interview. And then they can really reflect on what their feelings are regarding the situation with the adult. It's a 2-adult process. And it will streamline communication. It will also streamline tracking for us. So a student who might have an issue in Lulu Ross as a 5th grader, when they get to 10th grade, if they have the same issue, we will be able to track that. Currently, we do not have any process or tracking in place for a student who makes a threat other than the discipline process. And that has to get to the level of like a category 3 or 4 where we would track it in eSchool through DEMA. So this is a process where it's not considered just a discipline thing. It is a whole child approach of making sure that kids getting the help that they need. It will improve our school climate and safety by addressing those violent threats in a systematic, proactive process. And it has been proven over and over again in research studies to improve school climate, reduce discipline incidents, and improve the safety of the schools. We have in the state of Delaware 92,000 students being in the schools who are already doing it. The good thing about that is it is reciprocal across the state. So if we get a student from Red Clay School District, we are going to have their data from this system when they come here. So the policy itself just sets the stage and a foundation for us on what the threat assessment process is, what it means, and what the school has, the district has the right to do, and the process that we will take regarding the threat assessment process in our buildings. And it was vetted through our attorney, as well as the suicide prevention policy update. Any questions on that one?
You answered my first one. What does the lawyer say? Nicely done. That's always my first question. So we've been doing this actually without a policy for many years, imperfectly, I would assume. So I'm grateful that you've taken it upon yourselves to introduce this policy. Now, taking you back to the beginning of your presentation on the threat assessment, at first you said that this is the first of its kind in Delaware. Then you said a very high percentage of districts are using the program. So was this a simultaneous rollout to a bunch of districts, or are we trendsetters or are we not here?
This is a simultaneous rollout of the program, but we will be the first district to actually have a policy in place.
Okay, very good.
DEMA's working on creating a model guideline of the policy.
Okay.
I sent ours to the Comprehensive School Safety Plan team just to make sure that the wording in that first paragraph aligns with what they think.
Right.
But there are other districts that are doing this as a procedure. I feel it necessary for Milford that we have a board-approved policy to make sure that we are vetted through all of our avenues with our foundation. So we would be the first district that actually has a threat assessment policy.
So what happens to the data after the child graduates or moves out of state? Because the child has not, in most cases, has not actually committed an infraction. So I'm talking about record keeping, permanent records, that type of thing. What happens to the data?
Well, if they made a threat, they could be also down a discipline track.
I understand.
So there would be data there, but the data itself, it would stay in the student's record, just as all the other data would do. Long-term, what happens with all of our students when they graduate with their data is what would happen with this. Archived. This is an electronic database. The program itself has very, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm looking for the tech people, but yes, encrypted, and it is very safe and protected, secure.
So you've got somebody that's, say, now college age, and they had talked about suicide maybe when they were a freshman in high school or sixth grade. Who can access that?
No one, except for them if they came here and asked for their records.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
No problem.
Good work.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you
Almost
have
done.
anything else? Oh, you're not done yet.
Sorry.
Okay.
So the next one is just the suicide prevention policy, just to give you some information on that. It's the yearly review of the policy, aligning with the state regulations, simplifying the process. Right now, our suicide prevention policy is very regimented to like a numerical order, and we would like to move away from that and just have a statement of what we will do. And then it also will align us with the new electronic dashboard program for the Milford School District that's being used statewide that I just talked about with the behavioral threat assessment. So we will be able to house our suicide risk assessment and behavioral threat assessment data in this one database. And other than that, I think we are good. Yes, that is it. Sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry. So we will move to the Columbia Severity Risk Assessor, and we have our counselors, our school psychologists, and our student and family interventionists trained in that program. So they would be the only ones who would put that data into that system. This system is not like an e-school system where anyone can go in there and see anything. We will be very restricted with who has access and who can access what for each student.
So as it stands now, if a suicide risk assessment is completed in one of our schools, and there is a concern based on a score that is generated, I get a copy of that. I don't always get it immediately, and I always don't know like the outcome of the situation. Sometimes I see some notes and I have to call and say, hey, what happened? The hope being that we've done an intervention that is appropriate. We've gotten them the appropriate help. But this would allow, I think, a lot faster communication and access to resources for students. But we've never really been able to track the students that have made those threats either. So is it an ongoing concern for this student? Should we be more concerned than we are with a lower score? You know what I mean? So since I've taken this position, that has been something that has kind of plagued me with keeping that data somewhere. Like I don't feel like it should just be a form that sits on my desk or in a folder. So I was very excited that we were moving in this direction because I know it's going to solve a lot of our problems and get the resources to the students as fast as possible.
So this should help with mental health.
It will help with
Yes.
mental health.
And it also not just encourages, but demands almost that follow-up, that it requires that follow-up. So for both the threat assessment process and the suicide risk assessment process, there's safety plans that are done at the end of both of them. And there are follow-up emails and notifications that come through if they're not meeting the 2-week out, 3-week out time frame of making sure they are reconnecting with that student and things of that nature, that we might not have data to show that that's being done right now if it's being done.
Very important to mental health. Absolutely. That's the reason why I was asking. And follow up and somebody get to that final assessment that it happened. At least they have it.
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely.
So this information is kept in a database. Is it our database, or is it a statewide database, or is it like a national database?
It's ours through the company that the state has paid for. So it is a Milford School District site that each district has their own site to. It is not a national program where someone in California can go in and look at our students' names.
So it's not kept on site here, it's kept on site somewhere else?
Yes,
that
electronically.
So you said we could track students that come in from other districts. Do you have to request that information, or do you automatically get it?
Yes, so when their student number, we will put their, we actually uploaded them to ClassLink, which is very similar to, like the Math Dreambox curriculum. The students, when they put their number in, when we put our student's number in, it will track them. So if that student registers with Milford from another district, we would have that access. If they are not registered with us, we won't have the access.
Okay. And I assume that costs something.
It's free right now through the state.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Hale.
Making sure it was my turn. I have a couple of different things on the agenda for you this evening. The first being our monthly revenue, expenditure, and major capital reports. Not really a whole lot of change on the revenue side. You'll see that we're about 100% local collections, similar on the expenditure side. On the major capital report, I did want to point out just a couple of things. The Flooring Solutions contract that you approved at the last meeting has been added. Additionally, we were fortunate enough to receive some community transportation funding to support our middle school project and some of the enhancements that will happen around that project related to sidewalks and multi-use paths. The vendor doing that work is Zach Excavation. The way that we received that money, I'm showing it here on the report as an expenditure reduction because that's how it comes to us from the Department of Transportation. So I just wanted to make sure that that was pointed out so that you understand each time that we receive an allocation from the Department of Transportation, it will be reflected as a reduction in the expenses for Zach Excavation. So we make the payment and then we get a reimbursement.
Okay.
I do also want to point out today we were informed that the last of the bonds was sold, so we should be reflecting that information with an updated bond number. So we are still on time, under budget at this point in time. Right now at the middle school, they are working on the underground plumbing, footers, foundation, and framing the steel in the classroom. So seeing significant progress on that project is reflected here.
We come in under budget. Or how does some of that money obviously be state, right? So, yeah.
So the adjustment that would happen is in our market pressure allocation. So we would have to work with the state for both the state and the local district to receive a portion returned. So we received $15 million. The 3 was ours and the 11 was from the state. So we would split that adequately.
Did you have a question?
Is all of the CTF funds, did everybody come through? I see you've got the maximum there, but everybody's come through, correct?
We are allocated a full 462.5
Right.
that we were given by the legislature. Several of our local senators and representatives provided that funding through their community transportation funds. To date, we've only received 157, and that's just based on the work that's been done so far.
Understood.
For those pathways.
Very nice.
As that work is completed, we'll receive the full allocation.
That was my question. Very good. Thank you.
Any other questions from the board? If not, we're looking for a motion to approve.
I move to approve the reports as presented by Dr. Hale.
Thank you.
second.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Is there any questions on the motion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries.
Thank you
Thank you.
very much. I do have one change order approval for you this evening that should have been included in your packets for our vendor L. Wilson Masonry. This is a small purchase order for $9,654 for additional work that had to be done on the masonry for the windowsills in the 3-story older original structure. So just a slight change in the additional masonry work for that.
Okay. Are there any questions from the board on this?
This is field conditions, spawned by field conditions, unforeseen. Is that? Okay. I move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Is there a second? We have a second. Is there any questions about the motion? Anyone have any comments before we vote? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The final item on the agenda for Building Our Future this evening is the preliminary tax rate information. If I could get that presentation, please. So this year we're in a unique situation. We've talked about this at length in prior meetings where Kent County has completed the reassessment process, Sussex County has not. So as I present this information to you this evening, please keep in mind that it is still preliminary. We are still working with Kent County to receive final information, but wanted to give you an update as we prepare to approve those tax rates in July. So just a reminder, our school tax rate is made up of 4 separate components. There's the current expense tax rate component, debt service, match tax, and tuition. And we'll go through each one of those and kind of what they provide for the district. So current expense provides revenue to cover our operating costs, teaching materials, our local salary expenditures. This is typically set in a current expense referendum, or some people call it an operating expense referendum. And once that rate is set, it cannot be changed unless the district goes back out to an additional referendum for operating increases. So the state does require every district to maintain a reserve to ensure that in the event of a fiscal downturn, we could make our local payroll obligations and support the district. But there is a structure in Delaware right now that supports a model where a district must go out and seek a plan or an increase that would leave them for many years with no additional increases to that funding. So as an example, we increased our current operating rate in 2015. Here we are in 2024, and we've not had an increase since. So you spend the first part of that kind of trajectory creating that reserve, that buildup, and then you spend the remainder of the downward slide of that hill spending down that reserve until your district is in deficit spending and ensure that you then go back out for an operating referendum. So an interesting place that process puts us in. The debt service rate is also set by referendum, and when a voter says yes to a capital project, what they're actually voting on is a bond payment schedule and the approval of the district to sell bonds to finance that major capital project. So we have projects coming off of the books that we've had, and we also have our new project that will create new 30-year bonds that we'll be financing. So that rate fluctuates depending on our schedule with the Office of the State Treasurer. Our match tax components are also set by the Board of Education based on recommendation. We have only since 2005 collected the minor capital improvement match tax, and that's so that we as a district can receive the state funding. You have to be able to show that we've collected our portion in order to get that state funding. There are other match taxes that have been allowable that we have not chosen to exercise, such as extra time, technology, reading and math specialists, interventionists, and our state opportunity match. And then there's the final component of the 4, which is the tuition tax. It provides revenue to support tuition costs for special education students, whether they've been served here in our district or out of our district in another placement. And this is something that we've monitored very closely over the past several years, making sure that we're expanding in-district programs and leveling out the and stabilizing those expenses. So for fiscal year 2025, as we're planning to look ahead and set our property tax rates, there are a couple different considerations. The first is that there typically in our district has been a growth in the total property assessment or the total property value, which generates the revenue for our school district. So someone may have their own assessed value for their home. We collect revenue as a district based on the total property value for the entire district, so every homeowner. There was also the completion of the reassessment process, as we discussed, our final bond sale, which we were notified about today, and then just making sure that we're looking ahead at how to make sure that tax rates are stabilized going forward. So in order to try and explain this very complicated topic, I wanted to kind of take it back to the beginning. So our assessment basics, what is an assessed value and what does it do? So the assessed value is a value of your individual home. It's the way that they calculate your property taxes, and in each county there's a separate tax assessment office that completes that. In 2024, the Kent County values were updated from the 1986 values that they were once calculating, and in Sussex we are still basing our formula on the 1974 values. So the reassessment is in progress. It's expected to be completed this time next year in anticipation for fiscal year 2026. So what does that mean for us tonight? Before reassessment, some of you may remember my two little houses here. There is a process that has the assessment to sales ratio study. That's a study completed by the University of Delaware that applies a numerical factor to our property value to make sure that if you have one house in Kent County and you picked it up and you moved it across the county lines to Sussex, that you would still have the same tax impact. So that formula has been applied for many years. Our quote assessment to sales ratio has been frozen since 2010, awaiting this reassessment process to happen. So there's a number of different things that are being updated with the property reassessment, not just values. So that formula was applied, and you'll see that the house in Kent County had a higher assessed value because their values were from 1986, where the Sussex County home had a lower assessed value because their home values were from 1974. So last year when we looked at the tax rates in Sussex County, you can see that the tax rate was set at $4.66 and the Kent County tax rate was set at $1.65 because of that difference in timing for the assessed values. So even though Kent County had a higher assessed value, they had a lower rate, but the overall impact and to the taxpayer and overall impact in any changes was the same because of that assessment to sales ratio and that equalizing factor. So what does that look like after Kent's reassessment? So we still have house number 2 in Sussex County. They're still being based on their 1974 value. Their assessed value has not changed. They're still hovering at $20,500. That assessment to sales ratio is the current ratio from the University of Delaware report, and their total school tax based on the rate that we're talking about this evening would be about $932 annually. So what does that look like in Kent County now that they've reassessed? Their property value is current as of 2024. Their assessment to sales ratio is 1 because it equals what their sales ratio and their assessed value are the same now because it's completed this year. So their new assessed value is about $338,879, and you can see that based on the calculation, their tax is also $932. So for Kent County, in fiscal year 2024, the total district assessed value, the total property value for the district that we used to calculate revenue was $296,546 million. This year, the reassessed preliminary information that we have is that the new reassessed total property value for the district will be about $1.9 billion. So it's about a 542% increase. So what does that do to the tax rate? Last year, you'll see that we had our current expense rate set in 2015 at $1.13, and then we had the other components that were set based on needs for a total tax rate of $1.65. This year, because of the increase in the reassessed value, we're proposing a rate based on this preliminary information that would change the rate to about 27 cents to accommodate for those changes in property values. We're going to talk through that in a little more thoroughly. So last year, the district brought in about $4.8 million in revenue from the local tax components from Kent County only. So you take your assessed value for your home, it's for every $100, so you divide it by 100, and then it's multiplied by that $1.65 tax rate, and that gets your individual home bill and also generates the revenue that we see here. So because the reassessment process has taken place, there's a couple of different things that are moving parts to this. Delaware Code has a consideration for an increase to the current expense component of the tax rate post reassessment. And the reason for that is because reassessment looks at a single point in time. When that is completed, that is the number and we're moving forward. Typically, in any given year, we would reach out to the county multiple times during the year to get that assessed value, which has been growing in Milford School District at a rate of 5 to 8% between both counties. And the reason for that is strictly the construction, the additional new homes in our area. You can see that when you drive around the Milford School District. We've been growing quite substantially. So in order to ensure that the district does not lose out on that natural property growth that we've been seeing, we're recommending that we do follow the code and apply a percentage increase to our current expense component to make sure that we accommodate for that natural growth that we would have experienced otherwise. The match, tuition, and debt service tax rates will still be set based on the need and our debt service schedule as presented by the State Treasurer's Office. So for us in fiscal year 2025, those same four components divided by 100 and multiplied by the new reassessed value, the 1.9, we would see that the district would collect about 5.1 million, an increase about $321,000. And the different breakdown of that difference from last year in revenue to this year in revenue is below. So really that $321,000 is funds that the district would have otherwise received absent the reassessment process. So we're applying a factor to make sure that we don't lose that additional revenue growth due to the growth in our area. So really the takeaway from the Kent County reassessment process is that it is very individually impact specific. So every homeowner is impacted differently. And you can see that we've taken a number of properties that are within the Milford School District, but still on the Kent County side. And we've shown what the old assessed value is and what the new assessment is, and then applied the new tax rate. And you can see that the difference is all over the place. There's some that will remain neutral with an increase of just 57 cents a year. You can see that some homeowners will see a decrease of $300 a year. Others will see a modest increase annually. So really it is very dependent on the individual property owner what will happen post reassessment. And then in Sussex County, we're still chugging along in the same 1974 values. So our $3.21 current expense rate will not change. Our tuition, debt service, and match tax has been set based on the current needs and the assessment to sales ratio of 0.063. So the tax rate in Sussex County is going down just slightly to $4.58 there. So absent the reassessment process, we would have had the exact same impact and been able to say that for the 8th year in a row, we were decreasing taxes in the Milford School District. But the reassessment process put a wrench in that narrative this year. So what does this look like going forward? We're anticipating that once the appeal process is complete, that we will have final information from Kent County Assessment Office in June. We'll do our final calculations and prepare the tax warrants for both Kent and Sussex County, and those will be presented to the Board of Education for approval in July. A lot of information. Happy to answer any questions that you may have.
said, which is to capitalize and capture the new growth. You could be capturing those taxes regardless of the 10%. If I put up a new home right next to here, that person who owns that home will be paying taxes to us, whether they actually don't have it in their budget.
Correct.
So I guess I need a better explanation what the 10% is and why we're using it.
So the difference would be whether we collect that revenue in this current year or whether we wait a whole nother year to collect that homeowner's revenue, because it's likely that that home was built in the time where the reassessment had taken place and they're not on the reassessed value yet. Does that make sense? So that information won't be given to us.
My understanding of this is correct, right? That people are most taking advantage of this system, legacy homes, like homes that were built as close to 1970 as possible, right? Because if you just built a home last year, that home is already assessed at market value minus a year.
No.
No.
So if you built a home today in Sussex County, they would take that home value, market value, and they would equate it to what the assessed value would be in 1974. So for example, your home may say on your property tax bill that it's $15,000, and that's the 1974 assessed value. So that's why that assessment to sales ratio is important, because what that does is take those old assessed values and make them whole so that we can equate them to both counties. Does that make sense?
That's
Yeah. It's why the reassessment process has been so critical for so long, because there's so many different things that are dependent upon it, especially in public education. But it is complicated.
So just because you pay $100,000 in a home, from an assessment standpoint,
It could be 10.
it's worth that.
Correct.
To make it $94. So if everybody's the same money.
So if you go back to the table that we had here, you can see the difference. So the home that has now assessed value of $581,000, that's current market, probably a conservative estimate of the current market. Before it was $114,000. So substantially lower than what it would sell for or what the market value is today.
When that unit is still,
Correct.
that was my confusion. I was understanding that a newer home, it was assessed whatever it sold a year ago for 5 years.
No.
Can retroactively turn it into 1970.
Yes, they do.
No sense whatsoever.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
Was that? Oh, thank you.
I appreciate these little lessons you give us every year. I feel like I learn a little bit every year.
It's the
So-
houses that really make the difference in the present. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next is personnel. Dr. Amer?
Yep, thank you. On behalf of Mrs. Laura Mangus, who's currently in Dover celebrating with our newly titled Behavior Professional of the Year, I am seeking approval of the personnel agenda as presented in executive.
We have a motion to approve and we have a second.
Thank you.
Any questions on the motion? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, DSBA updates. Are there any updates?
None from legislative.
None from executive?
Executive had a meeting. talk about various referendums, was not successful. There was talk about rearranging of the board districts and it's redistricting. It directly affected us having here.
Okay. Thank you. Next up is our proposed schedule of board meetings. Sorry, I have too many tabs opened up. I can't find it. There it is. Any questions about the schedule? If not, we are looking for a motion to approve. Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second? We have a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Thank you. The motion carries. Next is introduction of new draft board policy. You had something to say? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't have my glasses on. I missed it. Thank you. Sorry. DSBA membership dues. That is next. Would you like to speak to that as a member of the DSBA?
So I can say the DSBA continues to be a very consequential group for us to belong to. It is our voice in the legislature. And since I now am chairman of the legislative committee, probably Milford has had no greater voice. And I certainly recommend that we keep the momentum going. They have decreased the rate from $13 per the calculation per unit down to 11. They've been able to, because of expenses, they've been able to be fiscally conservative, and it's actually a better value than it was this same time last year. So if there's no objections, I would recommend that we move forward with our membership.
Okay. Is that a motion?
I move to approve the dues as presented.
All right. We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any questions or do you have any comments about? Right.
Unofficially, of course.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you. Now you're up.
Yes. So I bring forward new board policy 5112, behavioral threat assessment, and this is presented as a read only because this is a first read.
Okay.
Move on. Mm-hmm.
Are there any questions for Dr. Hageman about the threat assessment? If not, move on.
Okay, great. We are moving on to revised board policy 5404, Milford School District Code of Conduct, and this is an action item because this is the second read.
Okay. Do we have any questions or comments or discussion about the Code of Conduct? This is an action item, so we are looking for a motion.
I was one of the ones involved in making conduct last year, also involved this year. While it looks very different, the format has changed significantly. A lot of changes we have made are to pull into line some new codes practices that are contained within this policy, though, are essentially unchanged. So if we were to compare
Which you did.
an infraction from last year's infraction before the coming year, you can see that they are essentially equivalent. There were a couple of exceptions to that. There were made due diligence, but vast. So it looks different structurally. So we are honest. It's even a matter of balance.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your time in spending with Dr. Weller and the rest of the team, because it was invaluable to have your collaboration on this.
And we are looking for a motion.
Move to approve the code of conduct as presented.
Second. Okay, we have a motion and a second. I'll let you pick who seconded. They sounded, yeah, they both said at the same time, so. We have a motion and a second to approve the code of conduct. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the following two items are deletions, so that we would delete the code of conduct for the elementary 5414 and delete school bus code of conduct 5417, because what we did was we combined them all into one singular code of conduct with delineation on the consequences for the different infractions dependent upon the location that the infraction took place.
Okay.
And this is an action item, as this is the second read for the deletion.
So we need a motion.
Motion to delete policy 5.1.
We have a motion to delete 5414. Is there a second? We have a second. Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Next. No, we're waiting. We have another deletion. Sorry, I didn't mean, I would talk to you. Sorry. We need a motion to delete 5417.
Move to delete 5417 school bus code of conduct.
Thank you. We have a motion. We have a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. Next is introduction of recommended draft revision of board policies.
So the first one on the agenda is 4335 for donated sick leave. This is a first read this evening. And really it's just technical corrections and updates to bring us in line with the current Delaware Code language. This policy hadn't been updated since 2003. So just making sure that we're in line with Title 14 of Delaware Code and making some technical corrections to that language.
Okay. Any questions for Dr. Hale? Next, Board Policy 5111, read only.
So we are asking you to have a first read on Suicide Prevention Policy 5111, which was described earlier in the presentation.
Okay. And
next.
That is that, I guess that's replacing a policy, it looks like. Is that correct? Replacing 5418?
5418. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Any questions from the board on that? Okay.
Thank you.
That's a read only, so continue.
We are also presenting for the board policy 5415, which is the school dress code policy. This also is for read only, as it is a first read.
Okay. Can you turn your mic on when you do ask a question so I can hear you?
I just had a couple concerns.
You're fine.
I marked all mine, I'm sorry. Is that different? The flip-flops in the secondary campuses, I know that in between classes, hallways can be very full. I just don't want it to be like some type of tripping hazard because I personally have had people step on my flip-flops and trip. That's just one of my concerns. Also, I think next to the sunglasses, we should add, and unless prescribed by a doctor, because there are students who have the
like the transition lenses,
right
and stuff.
And then I'm not really personally for leggings or sweatpants. I think that's just my personal opinion.
That was overwhelmingly one of the biggest items on everybody's wish list.
Right, and I understand that. It's just concerning because some leggings are not appropriate.
So we hoped to cover that, and I think that hopefully we'll be able to look for sheer and things that are see-through or anything that a reasonable person would find offensive in any way, that it would kind of go against the code and would allow an administrator or anyone else to be able to call that into question.
Right, and then there was one, oh, here I found mine. Where it says no holes or phrase where skin is visible underneath, can we just simply put no holes or phrase?
There, one thing that was brought up by the students at the meeting was that a lot of times they'll have phrase, but there's nothing
There's a
showing.
patch underneath of it.
Yeah, it's
I know.
just frayed fabric. It's not showing skin. And that actually is a lot, that is kind of common. So that was just something that was brought to our attention, that is there an issue really with that fabric being frayed if they're not seeing any skin? So I just tried to be as specific as I possibly could and look at every possible, I don't know, avenue. And I get what you're saying.
I just
The
see
phrase,
it becoming an issue.
yeah, you can see that. Okay, just no phrase. We along with the flip-flops, kind of going back to that for a minute, is something that I think historically has, and I don't know if any of our secondary folks, has just been something that's been worn even with dress code. That has never, shoes have never really kind of reached the radar of dress code violation, unless maybe they catch them for slippers, which I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
So we kind of know that that was going to happen anyway, but our concern was more around the elementary students and their safety for gym and recess.
I'm fine with them. I just know that
know.
those hallways get crowded.
Somebody's going to blow out a flip-flop, for sure. Yeah.
Right, it could be dangerous. That was my concern.
Yes. Absolutely.
So is it the belief that if we approve this and lessen the rules, that there will be less violations? Or will the students push the line farther?
Well, I think it'd be less to be, as an administrator or a person who's a dean, perhaps less to be concerned about what a violation looks like. I think that it actually really narrows down what it is we would be looking for in terms of offense versus the very long list of things right up to how many buttons and how many were unbuttoned that we had previously. So it would be my hope that honestly anybody with reasonable judgment would be able to say that this, I'm not happy with the way you're dressed today, and be able to have that be a concern. I think that would happen an awful lot less frequently than it currently is occurring. And so we're hopeful that that will be a big win for the staff and students, and that's been just the message we've been hearing all school year. That does not impact their educational performance, and that it shouldn't be controlled to that extent.
I appreciate the simplicity of it. I think it will be easier for parents only having one page to look at. I don't know
I was proud of that one.
if they will
page.
appreciate that or not.
If I have to put prescription on here, I'm going to be in trouble. I'll figure it out.
In fairness, the last dress code was one page, and you could say it all with pictures. That's what we did.
Mhm.
How does this dress code? We had the poster,
Mhm.
It's pretty I understood it.
Yeah.
So how does this current product jive with other neighboring school districts in a similar community? I'm talking about Indian River, Woodbridge, Caesar Rodney, Lake Forest, especially. What are they? Are they similar? Are we now more lax?
Yeah, I think I've seen there's been a trend in getting more lax. I think that Lake Forest, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of close to what we currently have. There were dress codes brought to some of our parent meetings, our first parent meeting specifically of a couple other districts. I know Cape and Lopin is a lot more loose and less restrictive than ours. I'm not entirely sure I know what Indian Rivers is currently, but I don't think they have a dress code, if anybody knows.
Well, everybody has a dress code.
A dress,
Doesn't matter.
uniform policy perhaps
No.
is what I should, yeah. Like more.
And to be clear, we never had a uniform policy.
Mhm. Right.
So when my son was in school, they had the current dress policy, but minus hoods, hoodies, and jeans, and that was
Yeah.
So, and even then, kids griped about the dress code. Ethan sat up there, and all the students, that the only thing they ever wanted him to talk about if somebody asked him was the dress code.
Mhm.
I think that post-COVID in 2021, the camel's nose got under the tent, and now there's just no community will. And I'm not talking about the students. The students are supposed to do what the parents tell them to do. The parents are guardians. There's no will among the parents to enforce the policy. There's no will among the administration to enforce the policy, quite frankly. Any given time, over half the students in the high school are in violation of the dress code we have now. I mean, it's rampant, and there's no way around it.
And I think that, we loosened the reins after COVID, or right around the COVID time when we returned to school, in an effort to really work with families. It had been a very difficult time. And I think once you let go of something, sometimes it's really hard to rein it back in. We were doing a pretty good job up until that point. In addition, I think that our students have changed, and education itself has just gotten so much more stressful that if there's any way to remove a barrier between relationships between students and staff, I think that that's important.
And that's the number one reason that I have no objections to the code going forward. I mean, there's a couple of probably housekeeping things that Ashley mentioned, but you'll get no objections out of me.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
One question I have, and you don't have to have an answer tonight, but I spent some time in one of the schools last week, and I noticed students with their hoods up were told to put their hoods down, and they would take 10 steps and put their hood back up, or walk around the corner and put their hood back up. So is there any way to combat that? Is there any, and like I said, you don't have to have an answer,
Right.
but
Yeah, I think that historically that one of the concerns with hoods and hats was really our ability to see the student on camera if there was an issue. Our camera systems have improved so much so that it's probably not as big an issue whether they have something on their head or not, but we're trying to still keep, that one thing from being a safety problem just in case. But it is difficult. And again, when I was an 8th grade teacher, we would have students who had zip up jackets, and maybe their shirt wasn't appropriate, but the zipper would go up and down all day long depending on which classroom they were in, because they kind of knew where they could get away with it. So it's really hard when you have multiple people trying to police one same thing.
So if you, the educators, and you, the administration, are telling us, the representatives of the community, what you need to make this district to repair and strengthen some relationships, it would be malpractice for us to sit up here and tell you you shouldn't have the chance to do that. Not to say that this thing, if it doesn't go correctly, might be revisited the year after.
We look at it every year,
Mhm.
so that's important.
So thank you for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I do. I just have a quick
Absolutely.
question. So when it says long or short sleeve cotton shirts, does that mean they can have stripes on them?
Yeah, we talked about
Solid?
trying not to have graphics because it's harder to police what's on those graphics, and we find that that's sometimes the more offensive things that are on graphics, but stripes or checked things would be appropriate. So if you had a nice striped polo or a shirt that was button up, but it had checks in different colors, that wouldn't be a problem. It's still nice wear. It's just not, yeah.
And how about pajama bottoms?
So it's not on here that you can wear pajama bottoms, but I don't know if we put it on the no list because that is definitely a trend.
Wasn't sure.
We talked about it though. We had the conversation. I remember discussing it.
I don't see it on
So
the
it's not in
approved
the
list.
approved list. So that's kind of like I think how we did it. One of the things we wanted to do was a list of things that you can wear, and then in that those things that you can wear, certain restrictions within that same context. Because if we went through the list of no's you can't wear, I think it would have been a whole nother back page. And we did pare down a lot of things that I think were redundant to get to this space, but that was a discussion. The slippers and the pajamas are a thing right now for real. So it's really hard.
In that case, I would be okay with the sweatpants remaining on there. I just think that that would open the door to the pajamas. But if you put no pajamas on the list, I would be fine with that then.
Make note. Thank you.
Field trips to Walmart only
Yes.
for the pajamas.
Please save that for your going out attire. All right, perfect. Thank you,
Any other
guys.
questions or comments? Okay. Thank you very much. Next up is
Oh, I took your paper.
policy
On it.
103.
No, I didn't.
Yes, this is the last board policy that we have for you tonight. And this is the board policy 6103. This is for read only, as it is a first read, and this is controversial, sensitive issues policy. And in our regular review of board policy, this one was brought to our attention because it has not been updated since 1982. And so it has been quite some time since this policy has been revised, and we are aiming to ensure that all students feel safe in all of our learning environments and that they won't have any controversial or sensitive issues displayed on the walls or brought up in the classroom. And so we want to be really cognizant of students' psychological safety at school. Yes, sir. Yes.
First comment is first paragraph of their purpose. Sentence that begins with recording.
Yes.
After we said this 4 times to figure out what you're talking about, it's probably correctly adapted or changed. So it says accordingly, the purpose of this policy is to establish guidelines within which district staff and students can teach and learn about instruction and its theory rather than I don't even think that because you do need to talk about the issue. And I'm not really sure what the difference is between instruction and theory and issue, but that was very unclear to me there. So I would rework that sentence, whatever it is.
I think that sounds great. Yeah.
Second comment that I have is under D, says MSC staff shall ensure that the learning environment is free of conduct or items that is intimidating, hostile, or environment. I would consider adding the word divisive to that list.
That's a great addition.
Because that's partially what this is about. And I'll sort of highlight this with my editorial comment, which is I feel like sometimes in education, in an attempt to uplift a particular group, you also realize that then comes at the expense of not uplifting another. And so it's very easy for people to feel left out in that environment. This word during my tenure has had proclamations that have sort of singled out individual groups on certain months of the year, let's say. But we don't do that for necessarily, all ethnicities. We don't do that for all religions. We don't do that for all genders. And so I feel like the intent of this is to symmetrically apply that reinforcement amongst all students, not just subsets of students. And I think that can be challenging because a lot of times, I think as educators, teachers, staff are always trying to uplift. But I think if one student sees you focused on this other student, maybe that first student is like, well, why is the teacher not paying attention to me? They're always paying attention to this other person. And maybe because that other person needs more help. But there's always that reciprocity of perception. So I think that's part of what this is trying to accomplish. That sort of uniformity, uplifting. That's awesome.
Thank you for that. And thank you for the edits, especially on those on the economy of language. That first paragraph certainly was wordy, and I appreciate the addition as well to section D. Any other questions?
Questions or comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
So we have reached the end. We're looking for a motion to adjourn. We have a motion. Is there a second? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstaining? Motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you.